Thanks for taking your time out of your busy day today. So today this session is about the power of three, which is the bringing together of three vendors to help with the move towards flash storage. The technology vendors in the power of three bundle, which I'm going to explain a bit more about in a minute, aids in the challenges that we see people facing when you're moving to flash storage. What we're going to do is give you an initial run through of S3 and what we are as a company and what we do and how we work. And then I'm going to introduce the power of three vendors. So I'll let each of the three vendors explain why they're part of the partnership, which makes the power of three. So if we're talking about S3, we're consulting and service-led data storage management specialists. And we've been going since 1988, so we've got 28 years of experience where we've been purely focused on data storage and storage management and all of the associated infrastructures. We are as independent as one can be. We've partnered with lots of different vendors, which you as a customer gives you choice, but it also means that for us we're able to ideally match exactly what it is you're trying to achieve at the right price point or the right technology solution set that you're looking for. And we do this across all sorts of different market sectors, across ever-changing landscapes. We're not continually working in the same environments. They're very dynamic environments. We're very comfortable working in very large, complex, mission-critical environments, and ultimately we're dealing with your critical assets, your data. We aim to become the trusted advisor to our customers so that we engage in enduring relationships, and we're the first people that they pick up the phone to whenever they have a challenge around this specific area. 2.5 years ago, at the end of 2014, we were bought by Capita, and we were integrated into their IT Enterprise Services division as part of Technology Solutions. So we're part of a much larger organisation that has lots of different specialities. We've been enabled to run within Technology Solutions as a storage and compute specialist. But what that brings us is where before we were very focused, or as we are now, still very focused on data storage and storage management. What we are now able to do is introduce other parts of our family within Capita where they have specialisms. So whether it's a Microsoft specialist, or whether it's networking specialists or security specialists. So we can now we've got a much larger, wider portfolio, and we can address much more challenges by bringing in similarly focused specialist organisations which make up the technology solutions that we're part of. And the way that we do it, the way that we always work, I said earlier, we're consultatively led. So what we do is ask lots of questions. We go and talk to you as a customer. We really try to understand what it is you're trying to achieve from a business, what you're trying to achieve from technology. And then from our large kit bag of vendors, we can design solutions. So the next phase is a design phase. You don't have to go take each of the phases. There's 4 phases in which we work. The design phase is typically where there's pre-sales engineers, there's technical design engineers, and together we form a solution that will meet the requirements. We'll work together with you in a partnership, so you're generally clear exactly what the solution is going to deliver for you. We train to the highest level, all of our engineers, so we'll go through all the vendor certifications and accreditations and gain as much experience as we can. We do all our own deployments. This is done with the aid of project management. So we've got Prince2 certified project management that is involved in all of our deployment projects. And we support our customers. So we offer free 9x5 support to all of our customers. That can be uplifted at a cost to 24/7 support, should you desire. But the support is manned by real people. It's always, phone's always answered. We aim to, or we do, close over 82% of calls in-house without referring to the vendor, which is a real testament of the skill level that the engineers have. Okay, so I've already mentioned that we have a wide vendor portfolio. So we work with probably about 60 vendors, something like that, which sounds a lot, but we have the who's who of the storage industry. So we have Pure Storage that I'll lead on to in a minute. They're part of the Power of Three, but vendors like IBM, Dell EMC, NetApp. So the tier 1, the mainstream vendors that everybody's heard of. We also work with what we call sort of niche vendors or complementary vendors that can complement the big mainstream vendors. Maybe do something at a lower price point, or maybe they have technology features and functions that the mainstream vendors haven't had yet. Organisations like Catalogic and Cirrus Data, which together with Pure form the Power of Three, which I'll come on to again in a minute. We've got a good track record of picking some of these sort of more younger niche vendors, if you like. Many years ago, we backed Data Domain when they first came to the market. They were one of the very early, if not the earliest, vendor focusing on data deduplication, so deduplication appliances. They went on to be very successful and ended up being acquired by Dell EMC. And we were also, sort of 8 or 9 years ago, one of the first partners with Isilon, as they were then, scale-out network-attached storage devices. And we became Isilon's largest and most successful European partner, actually, and they similarly also got acquired by Dell EMC. So we've got this track record of picking technology. We look for best of breed wherever possible, well supported, and where we can strike a good relationship with a vendor, because we need to have a good relationship where times get tough, and times do get tough in any relationship. So you as a customer need to know that you've got a good partner to fall back on who has good relationships and understands the technology well. And we do everything from, as I said, storage, we do compute. We've seen great advancements in software-defined storage and software-defined technologies, hyperconvergence. We do a lot with VMware and vSAN. So pretty much whatever challenge that you have will have some form of vendor or solution set to meet your requirements. The Microsoft there is an interesting one, actually, in that the relationship with Microsoft isn't about Microsoft licenses. It's actually a benefit that we've gained through the acquisition of Capita and also their subsequent acquisition of Trustmarque. So what is now Trustmarque Technology Products is one of our sister companies within Capita Technology Solutions that we're very close with and partner with greatly. And they are Microsoft's number one in public sector and cloud services. So Trustmarque's very focused on Azure. So if you have desires to do public cloud, hybrid cloud, Trustmarque are incredibly skilled in that area, have a huge customer base, and have also developed a portal, CESP, which enables Trustmarque to offer you as a customer Azure services through their portal, and you can track, manage, monitor your Azure purchases through that portal. And then very importantly, you can track your usage and your costs. Trustmarque have seen over the years that they've worked with Azure that there's lots of different ways of getting into Azure. There's good ways and there's bad ways, and the bad ways are the ways that are going to cost you a lot of money. So this portal now allows you to make use of Trustmarque best practices and make sure that you're not spending too much money. And the other thing that brings us is that most of our vendors are cloud enabled, so their technology generally in some shape or form allows data to move off their platform or through their software to public cloud. So a partnership with Microsoft Azure means that we can offer our customers a cloud where they can safely move their data to. This slide's a bit old, it's actually 350 now, but typically in any one year we deal with somewhere between 300 and 350 customers. And these are customers that trade with us on a yearly basis and are able to use our help desk and do use our help desk and do use our skills. And these customers are wide mix, they're not in any one particular vertical, so they're across all sorts of different broad verticals, and they're from the very small to the very large. So we've got companies like Genomics England, ARM Holdings, who have multi-petabyte installations, implementations that we've worked with them on, down to the very small, who is a single one-man, two-man business who might buy a backup tape from us or something. So we're comfortable dealing with end-to-end, the very small to the very large. Another thing that Capita has brought us is different ways that you can trade with us. You can either trade with us directly. The acquisition with Capita gives us access to over 50 frameworks, so there are any framework that you need to transact through, there's a good chance that Capita will be on that framework one way or another, and we'll be able to trade with you through that method. So hopefully that's given you a quick run through of S3. We're very successful. Many of our customers have been with us. Some of the longest ones have been with us 20, 25 years throughout that 28-year history. So hopefully demonstrate that we do the right thing, and it's a testament to the fact that we have become their trusted advisor, and they keep coming back. So moving on to the power of three, what we've done is we've worked with one of our distribution partners, and we've put together a solution set called the power of three. And as I said earlier, it's all about moving to flash storage and addressing the challenges that it brings. The first vendor in the power of three is Pure Storage. Pure Storage, an all-flash vendor. since its inception in 2009 has seen a phenomenal rise to success, taking on the giants of the likes of EMC and NetApp to become the undisputed leader in flash storage. Gartner has rated them #1 leading flash vendor for the last 4 years, and have recently just won it for the 4th time, which is a huge testament to their success. So along with Pure Storage, we bring 2 other partner technologies that we think will help to address the 2 biggest challenges that we see when people move to flash storage. The first is migration, and that's with a technology vendor called Cirrus Data. So I'm sure you will have done, and many people watching this will have been involved in data storage migrations. And when it was just one application, one server, migrating that to a storage array, they're relatively simple. But when you're now dealing with multiple applications, maybe VMware, maybe Hyper-V, mission critical environments, and you're being asked to migrate data in this mission critical environment possibly with no downtime. And that becomes really, really difficult to do. There aren't really any, or there haven't been any specialist tools to aid with that migration, and people do it with backup and recovery tools, or they do it with snapshots and replication-based technologies, which aren't or never were really designed to do the job. What Cirrus brings you is technology to allow you to do a data migration with 0 downtime, without having to make any configuration changes to your storage or to your hosts or to your SAN, your storage area network, seamlessly and transparently. Enable you to migrate data without making any changes. The enormous savings in the amount of work, and the reduction in the risk and the potential for downtime can sometimes translate to huge savings during that migration project. So the second vendor is Catalogic Software, and they bring the power of 3, a technology called Copy Data Management, or CDM as it's more commonly known. What CDM enables you to do is manage copies of data. And the other challenge we're seeing on flash arrays is the amount of snapshot copies, clone copies that are being taken. The technology within flash arrays, especially Pure Storage, enables you to copy data incredibly simply. But when that storage array, the flash system, is underpinning multiple applications, multiple servers, you're finding that where there may have been 8 to 10 snaps per application, you've now got 8 to 10 snaps across multiple applications which that system is underpinning. And the challenge is, how do you manage all those snapshots? What Catalogic will do is take all of those challenges away. It will enable you to simply track and manage your snaps. It will give you full automation with end user self-service. So your database, your application people can actually manage their own snapshots and mount their own snapshots very simply, and take the pressure off IT from having to do it themselves. So together, these 3 technology vendors will enable you to deploy Flash easily, migrate to it simply, and make best use through the management of snapshots. These 3 alliance partners were chosen, like all of our vendors, where they're best of breed. They're well supported, and we've got great relationships with all 3. So what I'll do now is I'll let the 3 vendors introduce themselves and tell you, why they're so great. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Savas from Pure Storage.
So thanks for having me today. My name's Savas Nicolaides. I'm a Systems Engineer Team Lead covering strategic accounts here at Pure Storage. So first of all, who are Pure Storage? So Pure Storage was founded in 2009 and the goal was to build the next great storage company. We IPO'd in October 2015. So we've been a public company for coming up to 2 years now. So we're globally capable, we're consistent, over 2,000 people, 45 countries. One of the things that differentiates us is great support. So our support is proactive and based in the US and Ireland. And it's not just about the products, it's about the business practices. So we are fair, innovative, ethical, and I'll talk about some of our practices such as evergreen storage later in this session. So if we were to summarize what we do in terms of storage platforms, they're effortless, efficient and evergreen. The goal from day one was to simplify storage and improve IT costs through efficiency and improve some of those headaches with regular migrations and tech refresh and take those away. So from an innovation perspective, what Pure delivers is we have storage platforms which are hardware accelerated. But we're not just about hardware, it's about the software. And Purity is the operating environment that runs on that hardware. And I'll talk about later how we're cloud connected and we use software as a service models to deliver that information back to the end user. So we've been a leader 4 years in a row now by Gartner. We're in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, top right. And it's not just Gartner, our customers rate us very highly. So we're in the top 1% of business-to-business customer satisfaction. And that's validated by Satmetrics. And we've helped over 3,000 customers accelerate their business through the use of Flash, transform IT and help them move to a cloud model and harness the value of their data. And we see more and more customers consolidating not just their most performant workloads, but everything on Flash. So you'll see later how we bring the cost of Flash down to be less than Tier 1 disk. So if the cost is less than disk, why wouldn't you consolidate everything on Flash? And that's from Tier 1, Tier 2, dev test, workflows, and big data and analytics. To ask a question, so typically your storage ages and gets worse and doesn't keep up with your hosts. And if you look at a tech refresh cycle of hosts, you get new CPU cycles every 3 years. You typically want to take advantage of Moore's law and refresh your servers. But we see storage being retained for 5 to 7 years. And is that really good for your applications if the storage doesn't keep up? But what if your storage could get better with age? So we see the status quo from our competitors is that, and especially in disk arrays, you end up paying more money to keep your storage arrays running, paying maintenance to that vendor because it does cost more to maintain them over time. And they will effectively force you to do a tech refresh and rebuy that same capacity, migrate that data, and go through that never-ending cycle. And similarly, any storage platforms that are node-based, you end up having to swap out old nodes for new nodes and go through this never-ending cycle of buying the same storage again. So what if your storage was evergreen and got better with age? So the way FlashArray, the block-based storage platform from Pure, works is your array is installed once, the array continues for 10 plus years, but components change and get better over time. So you deploy once, you upgrade as needed. Once you're on the platform, there's no further data migration. You get full performance and full performance through failure, and you get that through a 10-year lifespan. Your investment is protected, and we add software upgrades, hardware upgrades, and those are all non-disruptive upgrades. So if we look at this slide, this shows a typical customer journey from a customer who bought one of our earlier arrays, a 300 series in 2012. So they deployed just 5.5 terabytes of Flash raw. Then in 2013, they upgraded it non-disruptively, adding capacity. The following year, they upgraded more capacity, but then also we did a non-disruptive swap out of the controllers. And because the controllers are stateless, and because it's designed to run at full performance on one controller, there's no impact and no drop in performance during that upgrade. We then, when we launched the M series flash array, upgraded them again to the M50, again doubling the capacity of the array. And then in 2017 they upgraded again, but consolidated capacity. So our philosophy is that you should never rebuy the same terabyte again. So if you upgrade capacity and want to consolidate, then we allow that, and effectively you get a trade-in for the capacity you are consolidating and move to denser storage. So this customer went down to just 3U of rack space and then upgraded again and upgraded by more capacity and to another controller. So over that time period, performance has increased, less power per terabyte, increased density by 36 times, and increased capacity by 30 times, and hasn't wasted any of the investment of the previous years. So what we see is there's no downside to starting off small with Pure. Typically you have to decide on the model of a vendor's storage array that fits your requirements for the next 3 years. With Pure you can start with a small VDI project, small database project, and there's no downside because you can always upgrade to the next controller and upgrade capacity. So let's take a look at the technology and how we do some of that. We talked about it being effortless. And why is it effortless? Well, effortlessness also increases reliability. So most storage problems are because of misconfiguration, and the more settings you have to tweak, the more misconfiguration opportunities there are. So there's no choice in RAID. You don't have to set and manage RAID. It's always N+2 protection. There's no need to align hosts with certain block alignments. There's no need to troubleshoot performance. It's all flash. There's no tuning or tweaking. There's no long RAID rebuilds. If a drive fails, which is very rare in flash, it rebuilds to empty space. There's no tiers to manage. It's all one tier. And there aren't any painful upgrades. As I mentioned, it's non-disruptive upgrades, whether you're adding hardware or software. So if we take an example of how effortless it is, we have a customer who's a global top 10 bank, and they have 5 petabytes of flash array, 50 arrays, and they have one admin who manages that. So removing options increases reliability. We track between 5 nines and 6 nines of uptime. And unlike other vendors, we include upgrades, both software and hardware upgrades in that figure. And if you compare that to AWS and Azure, which give 99.9 or 3 nines availability, it's a lot higher reliability. So another customer example, we have a Fortune 100 pharma giant. They have 20 arrays. They increased their IT-wide availability, not just storage, from 97% to greater than 99% by deploying Pure Storage. So why is it effortless? Well, there's one box that arrives. It's a simple chassis install, one chassis install, a minimum of 6 cables, and there's no manual required. If you've managed storage before, it's very easy. Our philosophy is that if you need to go on a 5-day training course to manage a storage array, then that's a bug with a storage array. So from a platform perspective, everything's encrypted. There's data at rest encryption, always on, always built in. There's no tiering or performance tuning. All software, including disaster recovery software, such as synchronous and asynchronous replication, is built in. And instant snaps and zero overhead are built in as well. And there's a rich API to work with our partners and integration into the platform. Okay, so flash array hardware itself, very small, very dense, so up to 1 petabyte in a 3U chassis in the most recent configurations of the FlashArray//X. Highly performant, and as we talked about before, meaningfully simple. So the FlashArray is one architecture where you can start off really small and grow as needed, add performance, add capacity, all the way from the smallest array, the M10, to the latest array, the X. So the FlashArray is a modular and upgradable design. It's 100% flash optimized hardware. We have our own NVRAM modules, so we don't rely on battery backup. If there's a loss of power to the array, data is destaged within the NVRAM modules, so any I/O in flight. When power comes back, it's re-read out of that NVRAM back into the controller memory. There's no user intervention required. The array just comes up and is ready to serve I/O. The controller modules are active-active from a front-end perspective, so your servers can write to all ports equally. However, we do active-passive processing from the back end, giving you consistent and predictable performance. So at any one time, the primary controller is doing all the back-end work, and the secondary controller is forwarding I/O and ready to take over. Now, that means during a failure event, there is no impact and there's no loss of performance because the array is designed to run on one controller. So what we found from when we started as Pure, media, so flash media and the storage industry is changing very rapidly. So when we started, we were using technologies such as MLC flash, consumer grade MLC flash, and now we've moved to NVMe flash and direct flash, which I'll talk about. And looking ahead, we designed the hardware not just for the SAS drives that we could have when we launched the M, but with the right slots, NVMe capable slots ready for NVMe media that we are launching now. So we have the NVRAM module, which was NVMe, which we launched in 2015. We have slots in the chassis which are SAS capable and NVMe capable, controllers with modular I/O that we can swap out, and the software which does global flash management across the entire array. Our most recent flash array, launched in parallel with the FlashArray//M, is 100% NVMe all-flash array. It has an X70 controller on the back end with NVMe connections, direct flash software, and what we call a direct flash module. So Pure was different from day one with the way we introduced flash. So we don't rely on the SSD controllers themselves on each individual drive. We have always globally managed flash at the array level, doing garbage collection and wear leveling that you need to do with flash in the array. And with direct flash, we go one step further. We actually remove the SSD controllers themselves on the SSDs, and we're not using SSDs anymore. We're using raw flash, addressing that directly through the Purity software in the array. Now, what does that mean? It means we've got a simpler system. There are fewer things to fail, which means it's more reliable. It's faster. We've removed that layer of translation on the SSDs, and it's 15 to 30% more efficient. And that compares much more favorably to when you look at typically other vendors take flash, take SSDs and treat them like disk. If you treat an SSD like disk, you'll get wear, you'll get degradation over time, and you won't get the parallelism and performance that we're offering with direct flash. So the key to Pure is Purity. That's the operating environment of we call the FlashArray and the FlashBlade. And I'll talk a little bit about Purity now and then Pure One. How does Pure work? We'll talk a little bit about the technology here. So when a write comes in from a host, we will take that write, we will copy it to NVRAM, make sure it's safe and acknowledge that to the host. And then we do the data reduction. This is where we reduce the amount of data that's held in the array. So we'll do thin provisioning, we'll do pattern removal, we'll do deduplication and compression. And then what we'll do is build out a large write segment, which we call a RAID 3D segment, and we'll build that up and we'll flush that to the drives, encrypting it using data at rest encryption. And then over time we'll do wear leveling and refresh, we'll do global deletion and management, we will take the data that's still live, rewrite it to new segments and optimize that data over time. So by taking care of the flash, we're writing a lot less to the flash, we know it'll last longer, and we support the flash media under maintenance for the life of the array, whether that's 10 years or longer. For a read, we read from the fastest path, we decompress, we validate and serve that data back to the host. So that data reduction typically gives you 2 times the data reduction savings that the competition get. One of the reasons for that is it's a fine-grained 4K dedupe. So our granularity is 4K with a 512 byte sliding window. We have multiple levels of compression, so we have an initial compression and then a further deep reduction, and we do deduplication as well. So if your all-flash array doesn't do dedupe and compression, then it's not really designed for mixed workloads. It's self-tuning and there's no configuration required. It's always on. And on this slide you can see typically the data reduction we get from 3 use cases. Databases will typically get 4:1 data reduction. Virtual infrastructure and VMware will get between 5:1 and 8:1, and then VDI will get 8:1 and above. How do you manage the arrays? Well, to manage the platforms You can log into them directly using the CLI and GUI. That lives on the array, there's nothing to install. And all the arrays are cloud connected, they dial home and they send metadata, lightweight metadata, every 30 seconds and full logs every 30 minutes to an hour. We take that data and use it in several ways. So the first one is we present it back to you. So you haven't had to install any software on site to manage your estate. You log into the support portal, you can see your estate, you can get your alerts, and you can, from a read-only perspective, manage and monitor the environment, no matter how many arrays you have. Then also we present those real-time telemetrics, we aggregate that data, we have a large data repository of that, and we scan that repository for fingerprints of issues that have occurred maybe on other systems, and then we will proactively notify you of a potential issue that maybe another customer has had that we can resolve before it actually becomes a problem. And support user telemetry data as well. So we will proactively contact you, but we also won't ask the basic questions that you might typically be asked by a vendor. What's the performance like? Can you send me the logs? We already have that information, which means we can resolve your problem faster. All software in the array is included. We do not license software separately. So any software we have on the array, software that we develop, becomes available to you under maintenance. One of those is Flash Recover, so replication. We have asynchronous replication. So the slide here shows snapshot-based schedules of replication. Not only do we send that from one array to another, but we preserve dedupe over the network during that replication. And what we announced at our user conference and are introducing later this year is Purity Active Cluster. This is not just synchronous replication, but it's active-active replication where you can take a single volume, stretch it across two arrays, and present that as a single volume that your hosts see on both sides and could read-write to both arrays. So what use cases does that enable? It enables live migration between arrays with no disruption to a host. It enables transparent failover between clustered hosts across sites. And not only that, you'll be able to do synchronous between two data centers and asynchronous to a third data center. I'm going to cover very briefly FlashBlade, which is our scale-out NAS platform. So this is not really traditional NAS. This is a cloud-scale data platform which presents data across NFS, Object, S3, SMB, HTTP, and REST. And it's ideal for high-performance computing environments, data analytics, rich media, etc. And we'll talk about some use cases in the next slide. It's big, it's very simple, scales up to 1.6 petabytes in a single chassis and 15 gigabytes per second in a single chassis. And a single chassis is only for you. And we have multi-chassis scalability, so you can now scale from one chassis to 5, giving you up to 75 gigabytes a second of throughput. So it's really high throughput. What are the kind of use cases that customers are using it for? Well, a lot of different use cases. Many of them are new stack analytics, so using Hadoop and Spark, machine learning, so using NVIDIA hosts for AI and machine learning, any kind of simulation, extracting data, high performance computing, risk simulation, Monte Carlo simulations, a fast object store, so where if you want a fast S3 object store on premise as opposed to in the cloud. And we have customers doing fast database restore using this platform. That throughput means that they can restore their clients' data much faster than any other platform. So what's the unique data of FlashBlade? Well, it's very parallel performance. So very high throughput, high IOPS, low latency, It doesn't matter what file size it is. It's very simple. So lead time is about 2 weeks. It's about 90 minutes to install. Like the flash array, there's no tuning. It's very efficient, more than a petabyte in 4 rack units, less than 1.3 kilowatts in power. And it's highly available. So to conclude, when you put it all together, Pure Storage delivers a data platform for the cloud era, flash array for block, flash blade for scale out, object and NAS, and data services along with cloud-based management across those platforms. Thank you for your time. Thank you for hearing about Pure. I'm now going to pass over to Isabel, who's going to talk about Cirrus Data.
Thank you all for having me here today. Thank you, Mark, for starting us off. My name is Isabel, and I'm part of the Cirrus Data team. And today, I would like to talk to you a little bit more about what we do at Cirrus Data. So I would like to start with a small history brief of where the company is coming from, who we are, and what we are good at doing. So Cirrus started in 2011, that was 6 years ago, and was founded by two brothers, Wayne and Wayne Lam, who have been in the storage industry for over 20 years, so they are proper veterans in the business. The company originally started in New York, and that's where our main headquarters are. And as you know, currently we have presence here in the UK, in EMEA, and in Asia Pac. As an agnostic company, we pride ourselves to work very closely with most key storage vendors. And yes, our solution is well integrated with technologies like Pure and Catalogic. As you know, Cirrus specializes in data migration. And we understand fully all the risks and challenges associated to this kind of practice. And that's the reason why I would like to reinforce the importance of those risks in this particular slide. This graphic represents the results generated in a survey done a couple of years ago. And as you can see at the bottom of this graphic, we have 64%, which covers unexpected outage and downtime. This particular risk can be very, very costly if you don't scope your project properly or if you use inefficient tools for migration. The same risk can be associated to having some data loss or data corruption or some technical difficulties. And this leads me to my second point, which are the most common challenges associated to data migration. And these are the main 3 pain points that our customers face when they choose the wrong tools for migration. And I will resume them in 3. The first one are all the changes needed at the multipathing software or at the host level. Why? Because you might need to reconfigure the multipathing software, and rebooting the system might equal to have downtime. The second point is at the fabric. What happens at the fabric? Well, you might need to rezone all your switches. And again, if you have a particular technical lead taking care of this part of the project, you might take the risk of having some human error. Again, you might need to lose data or corrupt data. And finally, it's all about at the storage level or the changes needed in the LUN masking table. Again, if you have a technical person taking care of this, you might take the risk of having some overrides. And in general, as you can see, this procedure, it can be very, very complex, very risky, and very disruptive. So how does Cirrus Data overcome with those challenges? And the answer is very simple. We have created our star product from the ground up for one purpose, and one purpose only, which is data migration. The way how we do it is thanks to our TDI patent, which stands for Transparent Data Path Intercept. TDI will allow us to deploy ourselves into the production without creating any changes in the SAN environment. So as you can see, you don't need to create any changes at the host level, so no need for multipathing software changes or reconfiguring or rebooting the system. The same will happen at the fabric. No need for changes in the fabric and in the LUN masking table. So we are a truly 100% transparent solution. At the beginning of my conversation, I mentioned that we are an agnostic solution. And this not only applies to the fact that we work closely with all key storage vendors, but also we work under any operating system, any hypervisor, any host, whether it is VMware, Hyper-V, Windows, Linux, etc. The same will happen with any application. We work under any application, whether it's Oracle, SQL, SAP, SAP HANA Exchange, you name it. And we work whether it's a local, remote, or to the cloud project. So we eventually can migrate from anything to anywhere. Last but not least are all the different case scenarios where you can see Cirrus Data functioning in the best of our capabilities. Examples, it could be take refresh when we are decommissioning the legacy storage and replacing that for a new kit. You might need a tool to do the migration effectively. Then you can use Cirrus Data for that part of the project. Same happens with consolidation projects, data center relocation and consolidation, and migration to the cloud.
Good morning, thank you Isabel. So my name's Richard Wallace. I look after Catalogic software for the UK and Ireland. So I'd just like to take a few minutes just to take you through copy data management and its relevance in flash environments. So firstly, just to set the scene in terms of creating copies. As Mark pointed out in the introduction, there's very easy ways of creating copies of data today, especially with flash systems. And people are making copies in many different ways, either with replicas or mirroring or backup copies, whatever they may be. So there's lots and lots of copies of data being created in environments. Now, they're being created for good reason. That reason being using them. So whether that's for disaster recovery, for testing, for development, for QA, for training, sandbox environments, etc. So there is a real need and a real business value for those copies. If we look at a real world example, this is a global organization that we've been dealing with. For every 20 terabytes of production Oracle that they have to provision 340 terabytes of additional capacity. That's purely for all the copies and testing copies of those systems that they need to create. So it's a huge overhead in terms of production storage aligned to actually what's used out there. And there's a reason for that, and that's really to do with spindles in traditional disk-based systems. So people will peel off a clone on disk because of performance capabilities. So the more clones and the more copies that you're making on disk subsystems and taking that away from the production database means you're consuming a lot more storage and putting a lot more effort and heavy lifting into that copy creation. Now, if we look at Flash, the likes that Savas has talked about with Pure, we can run multiple workloads from a single system. The reason being is that that system is incredibly dense and incredibly performant with very high I/O. So we can run lots and lots of workloads from a single system. So that saves you a lot of space, and it also changes the economics. As Savas has said, Flash is now becoming economically viable. And if we can drive more value out of those Flash systems with things like copy data management, then it becomes even more economically viable. So what I'd like to talk about really are two key themes. Firstly, the people. Secondly, the technology. So let's start with the people. This is what we call the triangle of frustration. So we traditionally have an infrastructure team. That infrastructure team are really built around making the environment run. They're all about performance. They're all about reliability. But then there's a new breed of people in IT, the development people, the testing people, that are really trying to drive the business forward. And they're built for speed and agility and to really maximize revenue. At the bottom of that triangle, you've also then got the business leaders, the people with the money. And they're really all about optimizing costs, so saving money where possible, but also trying to drive the business forward. So the development team is saying, hey, we need more systems. We need access to data. We need to get fresh data fast so we can go about doing our job. The infrastructure team is saying, hey, we don't have the capacity. We don't have the staff. We don't have the time to do all of this. But meanwhile, the business leaders are saying, hey guys, we want you to be more strategic, but actually we also still want you driving the business forward by driving analytics and testing and development. So there's an issue there. So how do we solve those, and how can we make everybody happy? Firstly, if we can automate all the mundane tasks associated with creating copies, so stop that being a manual process. It's slow and it's prone to error. Stop using scripts. You know, many organizations we speak to have multiple scripts to create copies. Now, if something happens or goes wrong with those, it's a really big job to try and put that right. So it's slow and it's labor intensive. So with CDM, we can fully automate all of those processes and get rid of that labor intensity that goes on at the back end. Secondly, let the developers self-serve their own data. So rather than a developer going to the IT team to ask for a copy of a system, give them push button easy ability to just spin up their own systems as and when they require. So that makes them incredibly happy because they can go and do their own thing without the red tape associated with the IT team. And finally, get as close to real-time data for developers as you possibly can. If you've got this kind of auto-generated synthetic type data, it's never as good as using real data and can lead to bugs being put into the system as and when it's put into production. So by using near real-time copies of production data, you will see much better results from development, and also the business owners will be happier because you're driving the business forward. Okay, so let's take a look at the technology. So copy data management does three key things. It applies intelligence, automation, and centralization to the process of copy creation and use. So I'll just talk through that in a little more detail. So Catalogic's ECX platform is what we call in-place copy data management. What do we mean by in place? That means that we are effectively driving the copy services that live within the storage layer. So as a customer, you will probably already own these copy processes, and Savas has alluded to some of these. So we support Pure Storage. We also support NetApp, IBM, EMC, and from a hypervisor and an application layer, we support Oracle, SQL Server, Epic, Cache, SAP HANA, VMware, Hyper-V is also on the way. So we literally just link in through API calls into those technologies. From then, we then catalog the environment, we automate the entire process of copy creation, copy use through to end of life, and we become kind of part of the transformation journey, the digital transformation journey for a customer by integrating into cloud and really driving that agile piece around DevOps. And the typical use cases we see for copy data management are, data protection, disaster recovery, but more importantly, automating test and development, automating DevOps, driving analytics, driving reporting, and making that process much quicker and much closer to real-time data. So this is my kind of, in a nutshell, overview of what Catalogic ECX will do. Firstly, we automate the entire process of creating copies. So what we're doing is automating the process of creating snapshots, of clones, and of mirrors. Secondly, we track and catalog all of those copies. So wherever those copies live in that environment, we know who owns them, we know where they are, we know how easy it is to recover and spin those systems back up. We use copies. The way we do that is by instantly mounting a snapshot copy and presenting that out to a user as a full entity. So we could map it as a LUN, or we can map it as what we call full stack automation, where we map the data, the server, the networking, the IP addressing, the whole entity for that user to go about doing what they need to do. Those copies can be refreshed as quickly as a user needs. So it's almost like, we call it like the F5 button for a user. And then we can transition those copies. We generally spin them up in a test environment, but we can then transition them and make them into a clone. We can clone those copies or bring them into production. Or more importantly, for the IT team, I guess, is we can then delete those copies and stop what's known as copy data sprawl. So there's also some added value for databases here, and you know, we as said earlier, we integrate via API calls into these technologies. And I'll just focus on the 3 boxes at the bottom here. So the first is the fact that we're an agentless technology. We use something called runtime code injection. By that we mean we don't have any pervasive agents sitting on the databases. We'll inject code at the time we want to create that snapshot. We'll create the snapshot and then back that code out. So it's a lot less risky and there's a lot less for people to manage. Secondly, we have secure data masking. Now, this is part of our workflow process. We don't do the data masking per se, but as part of a workflow to create a copy, we can put in data masking technology, whatever you may be using as a customer, whether that's a script or whether that's, you know, an off-the-shelf data masking capability. The value of that in creating copies is we can put just masked copies of data out to those developers so they're not seeing people's credit card numbers or medical details or whatever that may be. And finally, we also integrate into technology such as RMAN with Oracle, which means that as an Oracle user, you can still use the technology that you're used to. So you can still do those point-in-time recoveries. So we just ingest our catalog into the RMAN catalog and make that usable. And finally, we also integrate into DevOps tools. This has become really critical. So if you're a user of a Puppet or a Chef or a Jenkins or those types of technologies, we can effectively integrate into those and deliver true infrastructure as code. So by writing a small piece of code into that DevOps tool, we can call up that infrastructure underneath. So just to finish off, from a supportability point of view with Pure Storage, we support all the arrays that Savas has talked about, the M series, the X series, and some of even the legacy systems, the 400 series, plus all the database piece. So you can run a 30-day trial of this technology. It's a simple download, very easy to install, installs in around 15 minutes, and you're up and running. So, you know, do feel free to give that a try. So with that, I'll hand back to Mark and he'll close the session off for us.
So hopefully you've seen then that we've got a combination of 3 vendors that, you know, together provide a solution that gives real business value and addresses some real challenges. If you like what you've heard and you'd like to find out a little bit more, please contact your S3 account manager, or alternatively go to the S3 website where there's a specific landing page for the Power of 3.